Not yet. Over
Let's
to you.
start.
Over to you.
Yeah, thank you so much. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for having me. It's really honor to be here and to give this talk on this important topic. I know that Dr. Roon has gone over this difference between qualitative and quantitative research in social sciences. I just want to give you an overview and then I'll move towards strategies of qualitative research in social sciences. So if you can see this slide where there is this sort of table that that says that here is the difference between qualitative research and quantitative research. So you are having this table over there, Dr. Arif?
Yes, yes. Yes, yes, we
All
can
right.
view it.
Yeah, all right. So here, what happened in social sciences, we started social sciences as a qualitative research. But then in 1970s, there was this, particularly in political science, there was this behavior revolution, or what we call is positivism. Behavior revolution called it for scientific methods in social sciences. So there was this trend that we should make social sciences like hard sciences. We should make it more on a scientific basis where we can use these statistics, numerical data in order to predict things, in order to make things better. So there was this behavioral revolution where we thought that by applying quantitative research, we would be able to set social sciences on this scientific footing and we would be able to predict things. We would be able to have more reliable data and reliable predictions there. So there was this trend of applying all these economical models there and statistics skills there. If we look at in social sciences, then these terms they sound complicated, but it's good to be familiar with that. In social sciences, we talk about epistemology, ontology, and methodology. So this was the debate about whether social sciences are scientific in a sense or not. If we talk about epistemology, epistemology is how we researchers, how we view social sciences. Is it we are viewing it, perceiving it as an objective reality or as an subjective reality? So, what is our perception towards it? This is what is our role as a researcher, that we called it epistemology. Epistemology means that while we are studying a subject matter, is it possible for us to remain objective in it or not? So, qualitative research was that if we are involved in research, we are interacting with that subject. So, it means that it is not possible for us to absolutely, im- to absolutely detach from the subject matter. We interact with subject matter. So qualitative research says when we are doing research, we interact with it. We are part of that. We are in social sciences, we study society, we study human behavior, we study human interaction. And when we do that, we become part of it. We cannot completely detach us from that subject matter. As far as quantitative research said, this behavioral revolution said, no, we should remain independent of what the subject matter is. So we are not going to get involved in it. We are not going to interact with it. So we are getting completely detached, completely objective, completely independent of research method. And then other debate was ontology. Ontology is what we are studying. In social sciences, if we are studying about society, if we are studying about human structure, if we are studying about human interaction, then this is all subjective. This is not objective. This is where qualitative research said that there is no objective reality. There is no one reality. There are multiple realities. Um, does that make sense? For example, Qualitative research says that it is subjective. Reality is subjective. Reality is subject to change. There is no one objective reality. For example, if we say that, let's take example of money. Money is piece of paper, right? So there is no objective reality. It is subjective. All of us, we agree that money, this piece of paper, is valuable. That why it becomes valuable, because all of us are attaching that meaning with that piece of paper. Otherwise, it's just a piece of paper. If we are moving towards, for example, digital currency, then this loses its meaning, right? So it means that there are subjective realities. There are multiple realities. There is not one reality. There is not one objective reality. So the subject matter that we are dealing in social sciences, in qualitative research, is subjective one. There are multiple realities. There are not one reality. While quantitative research says there is objective reality. Let me give you another example. Do you have any idea how many weapons North Korea has? Any guess? Do you think North Korea has huge number of nuclear weapons, or North Korea has dozens of nuclear weapons? Few nuclear
Dozens of
weapons?
nuclear
Dozens of
weapons.
nuclear weapons, right? So North Korea doesn't have a huge number of nuclear weapons, right? But US feel threatens of that. Iran does not have nuclear weapons yet. Iran is trying to develop nuclear weapon. But US put sanctions on Iran because US was threatened by it. So now question is, if France has 300 plus weapons, Britain has 300 plus weapons, then why is that British and French nuclear weapons, which are way larger in number, are threats for US? But North Korea, which has only maybe 20, a dozen or two has nuclear weapons, is threat for US. Iran, which does not have nuclear weapons yet, is still a threat for the US. So here, reality is subjective one. This is how we view it. There is no objective reality. In qualitative research, we accept that ontology, that the perception of reality is subjective one. So ontology, that is the subject matter which we are trying to study in social sciences, is subjective according to qualitative research, while it's objective according to quantitative research, right? For example, this chair you are sitting on, you use it for sitting purposes, right? But someone can use this chair as a weapon purposes, right? So here perception becomes subjective, right? So there is no one reality. There are multiple realities. This is one. This is one thing that we study in social sciences, that ontology, the subject matter in social sciences, is subjective as compared to quantitative one, where it is considered as objective, that there is one reality and everyone agrees to it. That's it. There are no multiple realities that coexist. But in qualitative research, we view reality as subjective one, right? Then axiology, another term we use, that how we narrate, how we describe our findings, our research. When we are describing our research, we use language, we narrate it. So this narrative is qualitative in a subject, in a term that the researchers narration becomes involved. It means that researcher is part of that. Researcher is involved in that, where through writing, through communicating, through speaking, through this narration, that a researcher biases, a personal involvement becomes apparent in qualitative research. While in quantitative research, we say that here is the numbers, here are numbers, here are numericals, here are the findings, it's value free. Like researcher does not have anything to do with that. So it's totally value free there. For example, if I am writing a paper on democracy, that democracy is the best political system, right? So there is this one narrative that since the time of Greek city-state system, there is this debate. Philosophers has been debating this throughout human history, that what is the best political system for a human society. So we tried different system. We tried tribal system, then we moved towards this empire system, monarchies, then we tried communism, fascism, and then here is a democracy. But throughout history, what we have learned that democracy is considered as best political system for a human society. Now, if we are narrating this statement, it means that we are bringing this bias there, that we are admitting, we are adding value there. It's not value free statement. So value statement is that we are already convinced that democracy is the best system. So here we add values. Researcher is attached, researcher is interacting, researcher is involved. While in quantitative research, we only rely on numbers. We do not care that how this language, how this narration is value is going to impact the findings, right? Then is methodology. In methodology, in qualitative research, we have usually inductive research. And in quantitative research, we have deductive research. So what is inductive research? Inductive research is that we observe some phenomena, for example, in a society, in human behavior. So we start with observation. We start with empirical evidence. And then on the base of that empirical evidence, we form a theory. We have a generalization. We identify a pattern, right? So here, for example, in this room, I am observing that women are more intelligent than men, right? So here I see that women participants, they are going to ask more questions, they are going to be more attentive and all that. So this observation leads me to this generalization that women are intelligent than men, right? So this, on the base of this observation, I make this statement, this generalization, which might lead to theory that says women are more intelligent than men, right? So it starts with observation, it starts with empirical evidence, and then it leads to, we identify patterns there, and then we lead to have generalization and theory building. In quantitative research, we have deductive research. In deductive, we already have a theory, we already have a hypothesis, we want to test it, right? So here, for example, it says that middle class tend to vote for right-wing parties, for example. So here generalization is already there. So I want to test it. So what I want to do, I want to go and I want to get data that how middle income families they have voted. in recent election. And this is how I am going to prove that hypothesis. I'm going to prove that generalization. I'm going to prove that theory, right? So talking of theory, do you know why we use theory? Why theory is important? Why do we need theory in social sciences? Any idea? Any guess?
In order to explain different phenomena which are taking place time to time in international relations.
Excellent, excellent. Thank you so much. So we use theory. Theory is, we use theory in order to simplify complex phenomena. So theory is a simplicity device. Theory helps us to understand things. So this human society, whether it's at the societal level, whether it's at the political level, is a complex phenomena. Theory helps us to simplify these things. Theory helps us to understand things in the simplest way. So that's why we use theory. For example, it is said that uh, theory helps us to understand this, what it is. So, what phenomena, what it is. Theory helps us to understand why it is, why it happened. So, if this is happening, what is the reason why it happened? And theory helps us to understand that what we should expect next, right? If A is causing B, then B can cause C. So theory helps us what it is, why it happened, and what we should expect, right? Here, for example, it is said that theory helps us to understand, to develop depth skills, DEPP. So depth skills are that theory helps us. Any idea what D stands for? So this is not Johnny Depp, that is a Hollywood actor, but depth, DEPP, depth skills. Theory helps us to develop depth skills. So D means that theory helps us to describe things. So D is for describe. Theory helps us to describe things, that what it is, what this event is, what happened in Bangladesh recently, right? So theory helps us to understand what is happening. Then E is for explain. Theory helps us to explain things, why it happened. So here we say that Hasina Wajid is having all these policies and that resulted in this people movement. Students, they started protested and this is why it happened, right? And then next P is P4, that is predict things. Said now, if theory helps us to describe things, theory helps us to explain things, and theory can help us to predict things, that what we should expect next. And then the last P is for prescription. Then theory also helps us to identify solutions. That here, if this is happening because of this, you should expect this is going to happen, then we should do this in order to prevent it, right? So that's why we use theory in social sciences, because theory helps us to understand these depth skills. So this is the basic overview of how we do see difference between qualitative research and quantitative research. As I said, that social sciences started as qualitative research. If we start these philosophers from way time back in Greek city-state system up till this recent history, then we do see that philosophers and all these researchers, they started social sciences as a qualitative research. But then there was this behavioral revolution or this trend towards positivism, where there was this tendency that we need to study social sciences like the natural sciences, where we are going to apply all these numerical numbers and we are going to have some prediction and stability. in social sciences. But later, there was this push back against this behavioral revolution on positivism, where it was realized that here we are dealing with human beings in social sciences, and human beings are complex, human beings are complicated. We cannot predict things like social sciences, right? Here in natural sciences, 2 plus 2 is always 4, right? But in social sciences, 2 plus 2 can be 3, 2 plus 2 can be 4. Um, what is the formula of water? Do you know?
H2O.
H2O. If we have two hydrogen atom, one oxygen, that becomes water, H2O. So if we are in North American region, water is H2O. If we are in Africa, water is still H2O. If we are in Europe, water is H2O. If you are in Asia, water is H2O, right? We cannot have that type of prediction and stability in social sciences. In social sciences, what is happening in American continent is different than what is happening in Africa or what is happening in Europe or what is happening in Asia, right? So here we cannot have 2 plus 2 is equal to 4. We try to do that by having this behavioral revolution, but there was this pushback that we are dealing with humans, we are dealing with human society, human interaction. We cannot have formulas like 2 plus 2. We cannot have formulas like water, H2O. So there was this pushback against this behavior revolution, and now there is more tendency again towards this qualitative research. So what strategies, what methods we use in qualitative research? Dr. Arif, can you please go to the next slide?
Yes, I have changed it. I
Okay,
have
thank you
changed it.
so much. So here we use different methods. We rely on interviews, focused groups, participant observation, ethnography, case studies, content analysis, and comparative analysis. So here, first four ones are primary resources. As someone was asking this great question to Dr. Roon, that how we determine reliability of data. And this is where we, because if we go towards secondary sources, there are so much information, so much data, and with social media and all that, there is so much misinformation that it's hard to know whether this data is reliable or not. So what we do, we rely on primary sources in order to find out, in order to have reliability, authenticity of data. So here, first four we are going to discuss that comes under primary data. So first is interviews. Next slide, please.
Yes.
So in interviews allows researcher to directly ask question with participants and to get information directly from participants to rely. So this is considered as a reliable data because you are going to ask them directly. You are having direct information that is considering as primary source. So we are having this primary source of data there. When we ask questions, then what happens that so there are many in universities, for example, when you do PhD, there is this ethical approver. They want to know that universities want to know that if you are doing interviews, then what questions you are going to ask, what ethical procedures you are going to pursue in your interviews. Interviews are considered as the most reliable source there. For example, when I did my PhD was on US relations with India, defense relations. So, what I did, I went on a fellowship to Washington, D.C., and I interviewed all the policymakers who were negotiating these defense deals, defense agreements with India. So that gave me a wealth of information that directly interviewing those people who were involved in negotiations with India. So I asked them all the questions that what were these negotiations like? What were your objectives to achieve in these negotiations? What was pushed back from India? What Indian negotiators, what they wanted to achieve there, and how they balanced these international agreements with Indian demands. So what is happening that these defense agreements are important because US is giving more importance to India, strategic importance. Any idea why US now really want to improve relations with India and giving lots of favors to India? Any idea what important power is there in
In
Indian
order
neighbor?
to counter China.
Excellent, thank you so much. So now that US thinks that China is next emerging power, China has potential to replace me as superpower. So now US is having all these alliances and counter alliances in order to counterbalance China's rise. China is rising as a major power, and US is not happy with that. So US is trying to boost India economically and militarily in order to balance China's rise in Asia. So US was doing lots of favor to India. So when I interviewed them, there I then learned that how US policymakers they were trying to have balance between their international obligations and their strategic objectives. Strategic objective was to improve relations with India, but under international law, there is a limit US can do for India. India was under sanctions at that time, and US went at great length to lift those sanctions against India. So I learned a lot that what debate was there, how domestic factors got involved, how president got involved at that time when Bush administration was trying to negotiate all these agreements, how president got involved and create huge concessions to India. So I learned that because in articles, in media reports, in statements, White House statements, or Indian leader statements, I was getting information, but I really got insight of the process of negotiations between US policymakers and Indian policymakers. So here it provides you wealth of information when you rely on interviews. So what we do, there are sometimes we rely on interviews which are structured interviews, semi-structured interviews. It is open, unstructured interviews and in-depth interviews. So structured interviews, you have set of questions and you only ask those set of questions to every participants, to every interviews. So that's it, that we called it structured interviews. You tell your university in ethical approval, these are the questions I'm going to ask, and that's it. And you are going to record the answers, and then on the base of those answers, you get this data and you analyze it. Then in semi-structured interviews, what you do, you have set of questions, but you are having flexibility there, that depending on the answers of your interviews, you ask more questions, right? So there are fixed questions, but then there are questions which are open ended that you are going to ask based on answers of your interviews. Then there is this unstructured interviews. Unstructured interviews means that you do not have any set of questions. You just go there, ask their experience. For example, you go into refugee camp and you ask each one what is their experience, what is their story, how they got into there, what was the process of escaping this civil war, if refugee camp is for that, in order and escaping that civil war and coming into refugee camp. So you rely on your interviews to tell you their stories, right? So there is this unstructured where you do not have any question. You are just trying to get their perspective, their story, their answers. And then one is in depth interviews. In-depth interviews means that you have this one-on-one interview and you are getting all the information possible there. For example, if you want to do research on, let's say, unemployment, right? And you want to know the consequences of unemployment on a society. In an in-depth interview, you are going to interview a person who has been employed, let's say for few years, and then you are going to ask that person questions about every aspect of being unemployed, whether it's social well, whether it's moral well, whether it's mental health, whether consequences for the people around an unemployed person. So you in depth means that you cover every aspect from one person. So these types of interviews, these trends, these types we follow in interviews. Interviews are considered as I said, that the reliable source where you are going to get direct information. So this is considered as a reliable data for your research. Next slide, please.
Okay. Yes, here you are.
So,
Focus groups.
thank you. Thank you. So next is focused groups. So this technique, another we use it, that how a group of people think about an issue. This is where what we do, we have a group who shares similar characteristics and we try to get data from that. We try to know that what this particular group of a society is responding to different strategies or is being affected by different strategies. For example, if government wants to implement different, let's say, economic policies, right? So you get this focused group that here, for example, your society is a diverse society. So you take these groups, 6 to 10 people from each ethnic group, and then you ask them questions that how this new economic policy is impacting their particular community, particular group, particular section of society. This is another considered as a group, as a good source, as a reliable source for data collection, where you are getting information in a group form rather than individuals. So it means that by having this information from groups, different groups of society, you get more information as compared to these interviews where you are only relying on individuals. So here you are relying on groups. Next slide, please.
Okay.
So what are the strengths of having this data from focused groups is that you get more data. Like when there is this interaction between a focused group, between a small group, you might get more information which you miss in interviews. Here, uh, it is more time efficient because rather than interviewing individuals, you are interviewing groups. It means that you can get more data and more insights from that group. Next slide, please.
Okay.
The next is participant observation. This is an interesting, again, is considered as a primary source where what we do, if you want to learn about any particular group, researcher is going to live with that group, to stay with that group for some time in order to observe them, in order to get data from that group. Here, interesting thing about is that you immerse in field. It means you become part of that field. If, for example, there is this famous uh, Polish British anthropologist, what he did, he wanted to learn about these indigenous groups, these tribal societies, these tribes which are living of indigenous groups. So what he did, he went there, he started living with them. So here he observed their culture, he observed their values, he observed their human interaction, he observed their tribal rituals, he observed their culture. So you become part of your subject matter, you become part of it, you immerse yourself in the field. So this is how you become a reliable data there, because you become not only observer, but you become participant. Like you are living with them, you are doing whatever they are doing, you are participating in their culture, in rituals, in their events, and you become part of it. So here you are not only observer, which you are observing their traditions, but you are participating in it as well. So this is another excellent source of data where you get this first-hand information when you start living with them. So here you become part of them in order to observe them. Next slide, please.
Okay.
Next slide.
Yes, naturalistic setting.
Yes, naturalistic setting. So it means that there is no artificial setting. In focus group, in interviews, you invite them to a particular place and then you interview them or you go to their offices. So it's an artificial setting that you are collecting data. But in that participant observation, what you do, you are observing them in their habitat. It means that you are observing them in their natural environment, the way they are living there. You are observing them. So in their natural environment, you are getting that observations and you are collecting data there. So it is unfiltered of any artificial environment, right? Or questions or whatever other types of data is, you are getting direct information, first-hand information there, first-hand experience there. And then you get this longitudinal approach. It means that it's not like you are going there for 1 day trip and you are spending day with them and you are observing. Rather, you are spending months with them. You are spending a good amount of time with them in order to observe their behavior, in order to observe their interaction with them. So this is the key, that this is a long-term research where it is not based on short term, but for a long time you stay with them and you observe them. This is excellent example of this, Alexis de Tocqueville. Alexis de Tocqueville, he was French diplomat. So what he did when US was experimenting this democratic political system, so US was introducing this democratic system. Then Tocqueville went there. He spent 9 months there and he observed that how US is implementing this new political system there. He observed there that what is the attitude of people, what is the collective values of that society, how democracy is implementing, how democracy works. And then he wrote 2 books on based of those observations. So he went there for 9 months, lived there, observed there, right at the grassroots level, and then he wrote this book. By the way, when he wrote this book, he predicted uh, in 1870s or something like that. And then what he did, he said at that time that America will become a superpower. So this was the time America newly got independent, was implementing this new political system. As you know, before that it was all monarchical system. French Revolution was in France, in Britain, monarchy was there. And he was observing that how this new political system is being implemented. And he predicted at that time in his book that America is going to become superpower. So he observed on the basis of individuals, on the basis of American people's attitude. He said that the attitude of American people was the best has yet to come, that they strive for good, they strive for more. And he predicted that America will become superpower at that time, that their social values are strong one, collectivism there, their connection with state and society is strong one. Uh, so one thing he observed that when you are going to implement democracy, then you need to have those societal values. Otherwise, democracy is not going to work. And what we saw in modern world is that US tried to implement democracy in Iraq, in Afghanistan. US did its best to introduce that system. Another example, we saw that Arab Spring happened, where in Arab countries, it started in Tunisia. These protests happened, Tunisia, Egypt, Libya, and then Syria. Civil war is still going on there. Here, people protested, they got rid of these dictators who were in power for 3, 4 decades. But after that, we saw that there is more um, instability there. It did not lead to stability or peaceful transfer of power. There is situation is more chaotic there. We did not see that democracy is functioning there, either in Afghanistan, Iraq, or in these Arab countries after the Spring. So the reason is that because you need these societal values for democracy to work. If these societal values are missing, it means that these prerequisite for democratic system is just not there, and system cannot evolve there, right? So this is Alexis Tikoli. He went there, spent 9 months there, and he observed that how this new political system is working. So this is an example of participant observation. Next slide, please.
Okay. Ethnography.
Yes, ethnography. This is another method we use in social sciences as a qualitative research, where again uh, a researcher goes and lives with them, lives with their subject matter in order to observe them, participate them, interpret their culture. Um, so this is the basic difference between ethnography and participant observation is that ethnography is a broader one, is a larger project as compared to participant observation. Here, basic emphasis on their culture, basic emphasis on their values and how you are going to interpreting them. So you become part of them, you become participant of them. So you are researcher is having dual role where they are not only observing but they are also participating in that setting. And here the best example is Bronislaw Molinsky. So what he did, he went to these indigenous tribes and he lived with them for 2 years in order to observe their um, collectivity, in order to observe their values, their traditions, their rituals, their philosophy, their history. So he became part of that, and he collected that data on the base of his observations by living with them for 2 years, participating in their daily life and observing them. Next slide, please.
Okay.
So strength of
Yes.
these having observation, participant observation and ethnography is that you get a holistic situation, holistic information, where you are not only looking at um, the research questions you are looking at, but you are also looking at the social context of that. Here, social sciences value more on social context. That social context is important, your cultural background is important in order to get comprehensive information there. So you can contextualize things and you can get comprehensive information on your subject matter. Next, please. Next slide.
Okay. Case studies.
Case studies. So this is another method we use in social sciences as a qualitative research, that is case studies. Since this human world is so big that we cannot observe everything, you cannot do research on everything. So what we do, we pick case studies. For example, if I want to do research on environmental degradation in South Asia, now South Asia is big. It has 7, 8 countries. So it is not possible for me to do research on um, each country in order to find out environmental degradation there. or climate change there, right? So what I'm going to do, since South Asia has similar geographical characteristics, so what I'm going to do, I'm going to pick a case study. For example, I'm going to do climate change in Pakistan, right? So by doing climate change in Pakistan, I can generalize it to the other South Asian states. For example, if climate change says that due to global warming, uh, some parts of Pakistan will become uninhabitable. And by the way, this is research that due to global warming, some parts of South Asia, they will become so hot that it won't be possible for human life to exist there, right? Due to global and rising, of course, temperatures, scorching heat is there due to global warming. So if I'm going to do this research and I'm going to take Pakistan as a case study, then I can apply these, I can journalize these findings on the entire region, because South Asia, all these states in South Asia, they share similar geographical characteristics. If something's happening in Pakistan, it means that is happening, must be happening in India, in Bangladesh, in Sri Lanka, in other countries as well, right? So we pick case studies there. For example, if we want to see that how, um, for example, literacy rate in Africa, right? Now Africa is a continent. So rather than doing this research on each country of Africa, what I'm going to do, I'm going to pick a case study. I'm going to pick one country and I'm going to look at literacy rate there, and then I can journalize this finding to the entire region, right? So case study means that you are going to um, take smaller number of cases in order to tackle complexity, bigger complexity. So here, if you are going to take case study, it can give an idea of the bigger picture. Does that make sense? Is it
Yes.
making sense?
Yes, yes, definitely.
All right, so let's go to next slide. I want to give you one example of case studies. So this is the book cover. Graham Allison, he is Harvard University professor. He wrote this book, Destined for War. So he wanted, so in international politics, there is a lot of debate there that next Cold War is going to be between the United States and China. US has strategic interest to stay superpower, right? Now China has interest to replace United States and become superpower. So there is a clash of interest, right? Here, US wanna stay superpower, China wanna replace US as a superpower, right? So here, there was this. Have you heard of this Peloponnesian War? This war, do
Yes,
you have
yes,
any idea?
yes, Athens and Spartans.
Athens and Spartans. Thank you so much. So here, Peloponnesians War, when Greek city-state was there, long, long time ago, Greek city-state, so there was this Athens, there was Spartans. Both were superpowers. And Thucydides were Athenian general. He was Athenian general. He lost a war. And then what Athenians did, they exiled him as a punishment. And what he did, he documented this 40 years of war between Athens and Sparta. And he wrote this book, The Peloponnesian War, right? When he wrote this book, he documented this 40 years war, and he gave reasons that why this war happened. And he said this war happened because Sparta was superpower, and here Athenian started rising. Athenian getting more powerful and was becoming equal to Spartans. And Sparta didn't like that. Sparta wanted to stay superpower. And here Athenian was rising and wanted to replace Sparta as superpower. So this was rise of Athenians that threatened Sparta, and this made war inevitable. So he used this word inevitable. So there is this generalization in international politics, which we learned from Thucydides in Peloponnesian War, that whenever there is a superpower and whenever there is a rising power that threatens superpower, there is going to be war, right? Now, if we apply this centuries old generalization in today's world, then it means that US is superpower, China is threatening that superpower. China is rising and is threatening that superpower. So, excuse me, according to Thucydides, there should be war. So here Graham Allison, he wanted to test this hypothesis that Thucydides told us whenever this phenomena is going to be there, where superpower is being threatened by rising power, there is going to be war. So he wanted to know whether there is going to be war between the United States and China. So what he did, he took case studies throughout history. He went back in history and he took 16 case studies. And he studied all these case studies where a superpower was threatened by rising power. So what he studied, that among these 16 powers, 16 case studies, 12 of them had war, and 4 of them did not have war, and there was this peaceful transition, right? Can you give me example of this peaceful transition before Second World War? What happened after Second World War? Sorry, not before Second World War. My bad.
Yes, British power transition from British to USA.
Thank you
It
so
was a
much.
peaceful.
That's right. So there was a peaceful transfer of power. It means that Britain and US did not have war, but there was this peaceful transfer of power. It means that Britain was superpower before Second World War, and after Second World War, Britain voluntarily gave that status to US, and US emerged as superpower, right? So there was this peaceful transfer of power. So he studied that why there was war among these 12 case studies and there was not war in these 4 case studies. So what he predicted in end, there are more chances of war between China and US because of their different political system, right? US and Britain didn't have war because of their similar political system, similar values, similar shared democratic values. That was capitalism, democracy, all these values, these powers were sharing. So, on the basis of these 16 case studies, he predicted that there are more chances of war between the United States and China. Next slide, please.
Okay. Content analysis.
Yes, content analysis. So, what we do in qualitative research, we analyze content. So, this is secondary sources of research. All the other, from case studies onward, these are secondary sources. All the strategies I discussed before case studies is considered as primary source of data. So now these are secondary data. In secondary data, we look at text, we look at images and all that, and we analyze them, right? There we have this literature review there. We see that this research has been done and now this research has not been done, so I am going to do this. So you find literature gap and you try to fill it, right? Now please know the difference. There is a difference between analysis and describing. So your research can be descriptive one, but we need analytical. So here content analysis, not description. So description is you just say this author said this author said this author said this, right? You are simply describing them. What you need to do, you need to analyze them. What does it mean? It means that you are going to have systematic examination of this content. You are going to say, you are question. What is critical analysis? Critical analysis is you question the reason. You don't intake information as it is. You analyze it. You question it. You contextualize it. You see that if author is saying this, does he or she has any biases there? If author is saying this, then what context he or she is saying this? What is the underlying assumption there? So you analyze text. You do not just describe it. So here becomes literature review there. So you say that in your field, this contribution has been done, and here this aspect has not been addressed, and this is what where I am going to fill this literature gap there, right? So here you look at now, next slide, please.
Okay. Yes.
So here I'm going to give you example of this Paul Kennedy book. So that is the rise and fall of the great powers. So he wanted to know that what is the reason. So throughout history, we have all these great powers. They became superpower, great powers, and then there was fall of them. All right. He wanted to know what is the reason, what is the common reason that led to fall of every great power. We have this from this Greek Empire to Roman Empire, all this British Empire, French Empire. We had all these great powers. He wanted to know throughout history, we do see this cycle where states become great power and then they become decline. What is the reason for that? So he went into history, he studied all great powers, and he studied all the context which led to the great powers fall. He studied all the conditions there, all the policies there at that time, which led to the fall of great powers. So he analyzed those powers, and then he came up with observation. He came up with generalization. He came up with this thesis that whenever this world is too big for one superpower to dominate, to rule. So, what he found by analyzing all these histories, he found that there is temptation for every superpower to dominate the world. But this world is too big for one superpower to dominate militarily. But every superpower has temptation to do that. So when superpower overextend itself, overstretch itself militarily, that becomes the start of decline of that superpower. Because you need strong economic base. When you are superpower, you are economically top power of the world, top state of the world, you are militarily top state of the world. So, what we do when militarily you try to overextend yourself, you try to dominate this world, what you do, you weaken your economic base. You start drawing economic resources into military one, and that weakens your economic base, economic foundation. So, when you weaken your economy, that is the start of decline of your power. So he observed that this was the common reason in every great power's decline. So he gave us this thesis, he gave us this generalization. He said, whenever a superpower overstretch itself, that is start of decline of its great power, right? So this is, he analyzed that content. He analyzed the policies of every great superpower. And he came up with this observation. Last slide, please.
Okay. Yes.
So in
Comparative analysis.
qualitative research, what we do, we also use comparative analysis. We compare things. So this is another method we use in qualitative research. We compare things. We compare two case studies or more than two uh, cases. We compare them and we try to find commonalities and differences, right? We try to find what is the common reason for that. Why one system is working in one system, in one setting and not in other setting. So we try to get information by analyzing. Sometimes we analyze what we call it similar cases. Similar cases means that if two cases, for example, two states, they have similar characteristics, but they have different outcomes. Then we try to understand why is that? That these are similar cases, similar characteristics, similar histories, but different outcomes. For example, we celebrated August 14, Independence Day. So we can say that India, Pakistan both are British colonies. They were both British colonies, got independence at the same time. So why is that India is politically stable and Pakistan is not? Why is that the democracy is working there and democracy is not working here? Why is that India is the fifth largest economy and we are at the bottom? Why is that? We have similar history, we have similar characteristics, but there is a different outcome. For example, we want to know that in Africa, these African states, they were British colonies. But some, they established themselves as democratic states, other could not establish themselves as democratic states. Why, despite of similar histories, similar background, some are having authoritarian regimes and some are having democratic regimes. So here we try to find the differences there, right? And then another method we use in comparative analysis where we take different case studies which have similar outcome. And we try to know that what is the reason that these two states are too different, but they faced similar events. Why is that? For example, we had Iranian Revolution, we had French Revolution, we had Russian revolutions. Now these three states, they are different from each other. They have different histories, they have different cultures, they have different characteristics, but three of them, all three of them, they experienced revolution. Then what is the reason for that? What social forces were common in these three cases that led to this similar outcome? So this is how we try to analyze things and we try to know that what are the different variables or common variables which led to this similar outcome or different outcome. So I just summarized these different strategies that we used in qualitative research, and I welcome questions now.
Thank you very much. Any questions which you would like to ask from Dr. Saira Bano? She is here. And she is connected. She's still there. Hey, कोई सवाल आपका?
आप just करेंगे आप that's the thing.
Oh.
That should also impact the biomarker.
Yes.
Which is tough. So happy about the बात है possibility of possibility to measure
जब तक कोई और क्वेश्चन ले लें
Okay, okay, Okay. Dr. Saira, one student, she wants to ask about the impact of the positive and negative impacts of the qualitative and quantitative research.
Yeah, that's a
What-
really good question. Thank you so much for asking this. So, positive aspect of qualitative research is that it is more aligned with what we do. So we deal with human beings, we deal with human interactions. So it is more suitable method for our research, where we are not only taking into account the social context, we are also taking into account these complexities of human societies. So this is aligned for that. It accepts the complexities and it is trying to comprehend those complexities. The drawback is that we cannot have predictability here. It means that, so in quantitative research, we try to simplify these complex phenomena. As I said that in quantitative research, we want to try to do the similar of 2 plus 2 is 4. And we want to stick to that 2 plus 2 is 4 and it is always going to be 4. But in qualitative research, of course, we have subjectivity there. We have different truths there. We have different realities there. If, for example, if I say that democracy is the best system, you might argue that no, one party system is the best system. You might point out that, see, China has achieved tremendous economic development under this centralization of power. So you might argue that, democracy is inefficient, democracy is messy, democracy is expensive, it is not suitable for economic progress. And this is what China has proved to us, that, if you have centralization system, in democracies, you have to take so many accounts. It's so slow system. You have to have the debate, you have to build the consensus, you have to take into account public opinion, media freedom is there, interest groups comes in, pressure groups comes in, politicians interest comes in. They want to have those policies which help them to win next election. So they are not interested in having these long-term policies. For example, it was so interesting to see that when Obama administration was there, that whatever policies Obama administrations had, when Trump administration came into power, they they just reversed those policies. And when Biden came into power, he reversed Trump administration policies. So this is messy, this is inefficient, right? So in qualitative research, we accept that subjectivity there. But the drawback is we do not have predictability there. We do not have stability here. We always look at that context.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Saira. We have another and the last question which the student want to ask, please. Sorry, Zafir.
Ma'am, you said in the comparative analysis, we mostly do the shuffle the data and we present it. So what are the new findings?
We shuffle the data in
Yes, ma'am.
comparative analysis.
Yes.
What do you mean by shuffle the data?
Ma'am,
Are you
already
talking about the mixed methods?
yes,
You are.
the present data we already have. We compare it with each other and we shuffle it, so we find a new findings. So
Yeah,
what
yeah,
are the
yeah.
new findings we are talking about here?
So here, there is always something happening. This world is so fast changing that we always have new things to work on, right? Context changing so much that we always have new things to work on. So here, all the comparative studies that has been done before, there is always new context there. Societies change rapidly. Then political system, they change rapidly. For example, Now, first there was this debate in 1990s whether democracy is a good system or not. And it was interesting that there was this US scholar, Fukuyama. He came up with this theory, Francis Fukuyama, that now this is end of history. After the end of Cold War in 1990s, he said that now we are done with conflict because throughout history we have been debating which system is the best. Now we know that democracy is the best system. Now democracy has proved itself. Now this is end of history. Now we are done with conflict. We are not going to have wars anymore. We are not going to have conflict anymore. And he said, and there is this another theory that says that democracies do not go to war against each other, right? So we established that democracy is the best system. Democracies do not go to war against each other. So if, in order to prevent war, the best system is that we turn every state into democracies. When every state is a democracy, and there is this theory says that we do not have a single example in history where two democratic states, they went to war against each other. So here, hooray, we are done with war. We are not going to have war. But now we had another round of wars. And after that, now what is happening in democratic system is we are seeing this, even democracies, we are seeing this right-wing parties coming into power. We are seeing this hyper-nationalism there. We are seeing this populism there. When Trump administration came into power, this was like not only in America, but in other countries. And your next door, Modi government is there that is considered as having these populist strategies, having more authoritarian tendencies there. So then we learned, oh my God, we were thinking we are done with war, but that's not the case. We have other types of conflict now. Now we are dealing with these democratic systems are being threatened by these populist leaders, by these right-wing parties. So there is always new things to work on, which makes these previous comparison redundant, or if not redundant completely, maybe irrelevant in some parts. Does that answer your question?
Yes, yes. Wonderful answer. You have a very comprehensive answer. Thank you very much, Dr. Saira Bano. I have no words to express my gratitude for your generosity because this is almost midnight in Canada and you are there to deliver a lecture for our students. So a big clap for Dr. Saira Bano.
Thank you so much. It's a pleasure to be here. Thank you so much for having me.
And we hope so that in the future you will do the same thing. If we invite you, you will deliver a lecture to our students as well in the future.
Yeah, sure. I would love to do that.
A bundle of thanks. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye. Have a great day.
Bye. Bye-bye.